Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining this month's Fireside. My name is Kirolos Riyad, and I lead the Waste Not, Want Not initiative at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. Today, I have the privilege to chat with Edward Pycraft and Hazel Akinyi. Before I introduce Ed and Hazel, I would like to highlight two goals of these Fireside chats. The first goal is to better connect our different communities so we have all put our full names and encourage you to add us on LinkedIn. The second goal of this Fireside chat is to learn from one another. So Annie, who's now hiding in the background, will join us towards the end and moderate the audience Q&A. So please write your questions in the comment and by all means talk to one another. I also encourage you to think about this question as you listen to our chat. What sustainability best practices can we learn from Africa? I invite you to share your thoughts on that question with us and with one another in the chat. Finally, I want to mention that sometimes there is a significant time lag because of internet connection, and I ask you that you're patient with us. With that, I'm honored to introduce Hazel Akinyi as a program manager at Break the Divide Energy Organization. She's passionate about ending energy poverty and injustice in Africa. She's also actively involved in fighting plastic pollution. I'm also excited to welcome Edward Pycraft. Ed is the co-founder of Food and Forest, a smallholder farmer agroforestry initiative in Kenya. To use agri-tech and regenerative farming to transform farms into climate-positive assets and improve livelihoods. Ed is passionate about rehabilitating the environment through diversity. So both of these guests are immersed in sustainability work in Kenya, where I think are many lessons that the world can learn from. For example, Kenya implemented the world's toughest plastic ban 3 years ago. Hazel, can you speak to the plastic ban in Kenya? What are your reflections on that?
Okay, it's been like 3 years on. Okay. It's been like 3 years on since the plastic ban. And all I can say is that we have seen a massive improvement in terms of the cleanliness of our environment. At the moment, if you walk around the city or public places or in the marketplaces, you will see that it's very clean and these single-use plastic bags are not there anymore. However, I think that there's still room for improvement because we still have an issue with the plastic packaging in Kenya, whereby most of the products, they've written that after use of that particular product, then the plastic bag should be returned to the store. But that's not the case because we don't have systems that enable us to do that. And this kind of plastics still find their way in the landfills or also anywhere, any part of the environment. But all I can say that the massive step that we've taken in the plastic ban was a huge sigh of relief. The plastics which were clogging our drainage or the ones that were ending in water bodies are no more. Yeah, so that's what I can say.
Awesome, thank you, Hazel. Ed, I understand you're very focused on regenerative farming, and I lost a lot of sleep after reading an article in Scientific American that was published like 2014, and they said that at current rate of soil degradation, that we'll run out of farmable soil in 60 years. So now at 53, I suppose. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit on soil health, the current state of that, and how regenerative farming can help counteract that.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, it's terrifying, right? I mean, it's not just life on land that we're hearing these sorts of these stories coming back. I mean, anecdotally, we interviewed Captain Paul Watson from Sea Shepherd as part of our weekly feature we do as Food and Forests, and we learned that marine life could cease to exist in the next 30 to 50 years. And this is obviously on the back of that recent documentary called Seaspiracy. And we also hear that 85% of our oxygen is coming from phytoplankton. So that's pretty sleep deprecating as well. Anyway, this is now all common public knowledge, along with what you've just reported there with the 60 years of farmable soil, which I think again came from that recent documentary called Kiss the Ground. But yeah, look, this is all common public knowledge. I don't think we can play ignorant and hide any longer. And I think it all comes down to how we produce and obviously in how we consume. But my experience, soil health in Kenya is pretty awful. I was in the breadbasket of Kenya called Kitale, which is near actually where Hazel is at the moment, just north of Lake Victoria on the border of Uganda. And I was told by farmers and by the Ministry of Agriculture that the main food crop, which is maize, maize production is down by 75% in the last 20 years. And that is mainly from pouring chemicals onto farms, which has obviously destroyed all the microbial life. I also spent the rest of my time on the coast in a place called Kilifi, where most farmers this year are most likely unable to even get a yield with the absence of rain and the increase in droughts. So my view is the only way that we can regenerate these soils is by mimicking how nature has always worked, which is to bring back old agroforestry systems, planting native, natural or naturalized species, and trying to ignite or bring back these vital nutrients by creating these natural cycles of nitrogen and carbon. So, I mean, our big push is to bring farmers into the organic sphere, so stopping them from spraying chemicals and seeing microbial life, insects, and the rest as part of the solution, not a problem. Having said this, it's obviously very complex. Smallholder farmers are definitely not the villain in this game. They are being provided with seeds, they're being provided with fertilizer for free by big ag companies, who, in my view, have only have one motive, which is to make profit. So, yeah, what we're trying to do is to bring education, skills, and capital into this organic, regenerative agricultural space. And I think with the right support, training, finance, insurance, we can change the scope of agriculture in Kenya and hopefully worldwide. And I think we've only got a decade to do it. So, yeah, I share your sentiment. It's very, very troubling.
Yeah, I actually watched Seaspiracy like a couple of weeks ago, and that was another reason I lose sleep.
Yeah.
It was really quite drastic. Like a lot of the stats that they've shown, and just the hidden environmental impact of the fishing industry there too. Sorry, just you brought up that documentary. I'm really interested to know and learn a little bit more about both of your organization. And Hazel, maybe you can tell us about your work at Break the Divide Energy and the different sort of project that you're working on there.
Okay. Break the Divide at Break the Divide organization. I am the program manager, and Break the Divide Energy organization has a knowledge on a new energy source, which uses the forces of nature, and we believe that this energy is renewable. It will be very affordable to everyone and abundant, which means that everybody at any economic level can be able to have access to this kind of energy and also be able to use it. At the moment, we are organizing a student challenge, whereby we are calling upon 1,000 students or young graduates who can be able to help us to introduce this kind of energy technology to the world, because it's a very new concept, and we are also trying to challenge science, or change the paradigm shift and all that. So this will require for us to create like a movement, so that people can be able to shift from the traditional technologies, which is not affordable or abundant for everyone. And also our aim is to change the energy bill at the moment. the kind of energy we are using, we are consuming at large, has led to a lot of effect, especially on our climate, and also in terms of access, it has been very difficult. So this is what we are trying to fight, and also to bridge that kind of gap. So I'm actually encouraging young graduates out there, or young people, you can join us in this fight on our project, and be part of the 1,000 students that will help us to bring energy to, common person who lives on like $1 or $2 a day, so that they can be able to do whatever they want. If they want to do farming, they can access that. They can get healthcare in their communities. So it's a very amazing project, and I can't wait for the world to have this kind of energy and be able to put it into use.
Yeah, so if you're able to share the some of the information on the challenge, maybe a link that we can provide people, so that people in our university can also participate as well. We'll be happy to help promote that. Just on the topic of
Sure.
energy poverty, can you talk a little bit about what energy poverty is, and how it looks like in Kenya? Like, what's the impact on that? Because I understand this is the goal of the project, try to address.
Yes, yes. Energy, especially, let me say in Africa, we have very low access, like around 600 million people only that have the access to electricity. There's still countries with low than 2% access to electricity. So you can imagine that everyone is not having equal opportunities. Those who want to study, those who want to do their work. Every now and then we also have energy challenges. Sometimes we have it, sometimes you don't, and it's putting a lot of strain. If you want to do something, sometimes you may not. If you want to access the internet, it's very hard. So we know the pain that this comes with. For example, the power companies are also rationing the power for people, especially if you come from rural areas. Power can be lost for like a week or more, or even in the cities, maybe gone for days, depending on where you stay. So you can imagine if you start like a company, and many companies that are coming up in Africa, and so this kind of limits development. And if we do not have enough energy for all the development that we want to do, then this is very impossible to do. So that's why we want to make Africa to be at the same page with other countries where they are, despite of our economic levels. So that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you, Hazel. Ed, can you talk a little bit about Food and Forest Initiative? What is your vision behind it?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was on mute there. So yeah, of course, yeah. So Food and Forest is a smallholder agroforestry outgrowing initiative, and we're using climate smart technology to scale and aggregate African farmers. So it's a bottom up initiative, which means that we're actually building capacity at the grassroots level, and everything we do starts with a demonstration. So I talk about food forests. So we create these beautiful, productive forests, which act as a demonstration training center, obviously for smallholder farmers to learn about agroecology, which is organic farming, and agroforestry, and it's also there to allow our partners to showcase their services and products. So what we're trying to do is create the #1 outgrowing initiative in Africa, which is a sustainable and equitable farming initiative. So what that means with our partners is that we want to create this very comprehensive journey, which starts with microfinance. So the microfinance will enable smallholder farmers who would usually not have access to capital because most banks are unwilling to lend. We would facilitate the microfinancing element, so farmers can purchase organic inputs such as seeds, organic fertilizer, also water management, security fencing, and every bundle that we sell will have microinsurance attached to it. In terms of our vision, we're very ambitious. We want to spend the next 20 years planting 100 million trees, which equates to around 25 million tons of CO2 sequestered, either through woody biomass, so through the trees, or through soil, which is called soil organic carbon. And this is obviously all in line with the SDGs and the net zero targets that many organizations are now working towards. So we are a Plan Vivo registered program, which means we can generate our own carbon credits. And obviously within this 100 million trees, we want to work with at least 200,000 smallholder farmers. So ultimately what we're hedging our bet on is that without smallholder farmers in the climate solution, we as a global society will fail. 70 to 80% of food production in Africa comes from smallholder farmers. So it's about time that we recognize that, and we work in a sort of inclusive environment, working with marginalized communities, providing them with the same technology, the same skills that big agriculture is providing to wealthy, medium to large scale farmers. And, there's a lot of attention going into the space now. We can see that, whereas maybe 2 to 5 years ago, we would have struggled to talk to some of the big management consultants and accountancy firms, they're now willing to spend their time speculating on, the success of our program, which is high risk, hopefully high reward as well. But we can see that, all of these banks and large organizations are moving into this inclusive space, and they see that the smallholder farmer, when we talk about smallholder farmers, we're talking about 500 million people worldwide, with over, I think, 2 billion people reliant on their services, i.e. family members. So it's a huge market, and if you can get it right on day one, I think it's there's huge opportunity for everyone to succeed. And as I said, we're a business, we're not an NGO. We want to bring profit, but profit with purpose.
And I think it's a very smart connection with the carbon credit part of it, in terms of financing a lot of that work and connecting to carbon credit program, because I think there's a lot of work that can be done differently in order to reduce carbon emission, and usually the problem is cost, and I think just tapping into that as a financial mechanism. Sorry, I'm gonna apologize for the mowing that's happening outside. My neighbor decided to mow the lawns, and I think this is like an excellent example of how not to do stuff, just in terms of how it affects our bee population, and talk about soil and food. The problem is just so visible, you cannot turn away from it. So in a previous Fireside, Joshua, who leads the Green Africa Youth Organization, talked about how Ghana has one of the largest dump sites in the world for toxic electronic waste. And one major problem that we ignore here in Canada is the fact that so much of our waste gets shipped all the way to Asia and Africa. So I'd like to play this video where he talks about this problem. It's a little long, but I think it's really important to start with it.
Joshua, what do you think where you are? You said there's a lot of Western garbage coming in, and how do people feel about that? Is there a lot of opposition? Is there a movement growing? What are attitudes like there about that?
It's it's not positive entirely. It depends on which side of the table you sit. For the person who is processing the waste, this is a livelihood, right? So there's waste coming in from Europe, from the US, coming into Ghana. we host one of the biggest dump sites in the world when it comes to electronic waste. So, and there's a huge community around this, and we're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of people who are relying on this electronic waste coming into their country, having to process it and making a livelihood out of it. It's bad. It has to change, but there has to be a transition approach which allows them to also have a livelihood while changing the system. And again, this is something that the industry itself has largely ignored. The products which are coming in are from global brands. We're talking about Microsoft, we're talking about Apple, Samsung, Motorola. We have all these LG, all these big brands, and they know their products are there, but they're not taking responsibility for it because there's no proper supply chain analysis of life cycle of products. And when these analyses are done, they are done in a very exclusive environment. So you do it for, say, Europe, and that is it, right? How the product move out of Europe and end up somewhere in Sudan, nobody really cares about that. And this is something that the regulation should not be left to the recipient country, say Ghana, to deal with this alone. It should be done together with the industries, the manufacturers themselves, to see how do we have a transparent supply chain where you put out 10,000 products per day, and you know that you have a capacity of managing those same 10,000 products when they reach end of life. And this is the same thing that applies to plastics. I mean, Coca-Cola is doing great. We're supporting some initiatives here and there, but look at the amount of bottles, the quantity of bottles you put out every day. So if you set up one recycling plant in one big city, you've done nothing. But yet, this sits in sustainability report. They get hailed, and everyone clap for them. This is amazing. They put up one recycling plant. But we should look at how much waste you put on the market and how much capacity or investment is going into you taking that product back and repurposing it. And if you can't do that, then don't put it on the market.
So Hazel, can you speak to the impact on the communities that you have observed in Kenya from Western garbage coming in and being exported?
Carol, the Western garbage has ended up in Kenya in many forms. Talking about Kenya, I've seen garbage in form of textiles, rubber, used cars, and even electronic waste. I think that people in these developing countries, they do love these products because they're cheap and affordable, but they don't have they are not durable. You cannot use them for long. So it's you can use it maybe for a year or less. And some even come here in very, very bad conditions. So all I can say is that there are no systems, just as Joshua said, there are no systems that have been put in place to be able to check this kind of products. They do find themselves like in our markets, and people do buy them. So you cannot blame people because of the economy, they don't have money, and also you cannot blame those who are selling them because they're also doing it for livelihood. So by the end of the day, this kind of waste, they will end up in our water bodies or environment, and before you know it, they will end up in our food systems, and we consume them. By the end of the day, we also do not have technologies to be able to process these kinds of waste. So you'll find that they'll end up in the landfills, and there's no any form of recycling that can be done on them. So by the end of the day, they will cause also diseases like cancer, and you'll find that cancer is really growing in Kenya, and when you want to trace the sources of this kind of diseases, it may be very, very difficult. They trace back to the behavior that we are adopting in accepting the Western garbages here in Kenya. And at the moment, we have movements in Kenya whereby people are saying that signing a petition so that this kind of wastes do not end up here, because we are tired of seeing the landfills grow and nothing to show for it.
One of the things that Joshua has mentioned is a lot of the toxic waste, electronic waste, end up in Africa. not as waste, but the actually, I mean, when you go in, you don't go in as waste, you go in as like computer donations for schools and so on. But you're always like in very close to the end of life. As 6 months later, it's end of life and it goes to landfills. Which is problematic. And I lived so I'm originally from Egypt, and I lived there for 17 years. And even though I've only been introduced to the contemporary sustainability movement when I came here in Canada, there are many of the best practices that have been woven into the African culture for centuries. Ed, I'm wondering, since you have been in Kenya for about 3 months, I think you've just left maybe a couple of days ago, and you're turning back again. And I'm wondering if you can share your reflections on sustainability best practices and that the rest of the world can learn from Kenya.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the most obvious one is the ancient sort of indigenous knowledge that you can pick up by spending time with indigenous communities. So, we actually started off working with the Maasai just on the border of Tanzania about 3 years ago. And, from my learnings and looking into how the Maasai culture and practices have been for centuries, they've always been in thread with and in balance with nature. So they were stewards of their lands, and they used to, migrate hundreds or thousands of miles in search of fresh pasture, never depleting, but always replenishing, moving cattle in a sort of seasonal shift. Obviously, what's happened now is the Maasai have been penned in with other communities as well into these group ranches where they're fighting for survival because it's not natural to have 1 million cattle in 1,000 kilometer squares when they used to be able to walk effectively from Tanzania all the way up to Ethiopia. So I think you can learn a lot from seeing how the ancient civilizations used to procure and look after their land, and that's also true in America. You look at what's happening with the fires in California. That wasn't an issue when the native Indians were doing their own sort of sustainable land management practices, which included, actually creating their own fires, which would then prevent these large-scale issues that we're facing now. But in terms of new sustainability best practices, I mean, there's some fantastic organizations in Kenya that are seeing, obviously, waste as energy, recycling, upcycling, using human waste for biogas, using insects to create protein, which will be animal feed. And at some point, I think we'll actually have it as human feed as well. So it won't be too long until we're eating insects, I think, world over. But I think in terms of being a program developer, how can we ensure that these best practices are actually sustainable? Well, I think it comes down to education and understanding cultural and social norms, i.e. solar cookers are now huge in Africa. There's lots of them popping up. There's so many great reasons to have a solar cooker. First one being obviously reducing the amount of demand or pressure on the natural resources, i.e. firewood. But another one being indoor pollution. Of course, it's one of the largest killers, I think, globally, with about 4 million people dying each year. But what we have to understand is that for Kenyan or maybe African people, they don't want to necessarily cook with a solar cooker. They enjoy the taste and the flavors that come from cooking with firewood. So, I mean, that's just an example. But what you do see is lots of people coming into this whole sustainability space, talking about creating apps, professing to change the world. But I think without proper instructions and a clear sort of circular economy strategy, I don't necessarily see their utility on a grand scale. I think it's from a sort of business point of view, I'm not sure it's sustainable. But yeah, I think ultimately there's a lot happening. I think Kenya is a very dynamic place, probably the sort of hub of East Africa. And yeah, I'm seriously excited by what's going on. And, I'm in the ag space, but the ag tech space is blowing up. And as I mentioned before, people are moving into this financial inclusivity where they're seeing smallholder farmers as a sort of a force for good, and also something that's a scalable target market, because people are desperate, and they're living on the front line of climate change. So us in the West, I mean, especially coming from the UK, it's we have a very easy time in terms of weather conditions, and even the sort of social issues. It's much more straightforward. But Africa is in desperate need of good initiatives that have been well thought out and sustainable in terms of the financials, the environmental aspect, and the social aspect.
Okay, Hazel's back. Welcome back. Hazel, from our previous conversation,
yes.
You mentioned you'd like to inspire future generation to become fearless in the fight for a sustainable world. How do you go about doing that in your own practices?
I think that being fearless is something that the next generation should be able to practice and adapt to, because the current world that we live in, there are many wrongs, a lot of environmental injustices that are going on, and we need to inspire them in order to fight against these injustices. Because if we are quiet, then the wrongs will continue, and everyone is going to suffer for what they even do not know about. So that's what this is all about. In my fight for free, world, a planet that is free from plastic pollution, it involves, telling the giant companies that are involved in producing this kind of plastic, especially the PET waste, to stop whatever they're doing, to find alternatives, or to be able to track their waste and be able to recycle them. All that require, someone to be very, very fearless, and fighting energy injustices, and also companies that are polluting, the environment through fossil fuels. These are giant companies that control the economy.
Oh, I think Hazel got disconnected. So what I'll do, I'll move to the next question. I think maybe after that we can get some questions from the audience and have any join us, and encourage people watching to write questions in the chat. Ed, when we first talked, you mentioned you talked a lot about your music interest, and I'm just curious about how you went from music to agri regenerative farming. How do you reconcile those two passions? And I'm wondering if there are synergies between them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up music. Always brings a smile to my face. And I know that we're both on the One Better World communities as well. So that's actually how we connected. I do remember that. No, I think music for me is my passion. It always has been. And I think in another life, I would have liked to have made it as a musician. But I think I gave up that dream when I was about 15. Nonetheless, I think it's a great conduit for sharing powerful ideas, messages, inspiring change. There's just been so much that's come from some of the big icons out there. I think it's a good way of galvanizing people. Having said that, I think regenerative agriculture is pretty cool. With Orchestra, which is the music vehicle that I run in the UK with my brother, we've spent the last 3 years building live and digital experiences for brands, which enables building a platform for brands to talk about their vision, their goals, and effectively creating just a cool experience for their audience. So I think obviously with COVID, it's made it rather difficult to continue. However, we are seeing green shoots. But with Food and Forests, I've been working in the background on that for the last 3 years as well. And I think since COVID is moved to center stage. Everyone's talking about sustainability now, whereas 3 years ago it was still sort of almost a foreign concept, at least for the mainstream. So I think in terms of how I'd like to bring those together, I think music is great for raising awareness. So I think if I could do music events in Africa or in Kenya, I'd be very interested in doing that, bringing in permaculture, syntropic agriculture, all these great principles, and bringing people together through music, sharing lessons, learnings. That would be very cool. And I think, bringing, there's an example of one organization called Just Dig It, I think they're a Dutch organization, and they have something called the Rain Dance, where they bring like a truck with a sound system on the back, and they bring local farmers, and it brings community together, and then they teach them about how they can effectively create a sustainable land use system in their locality. So again, I can see the sort of utility in that. Bringing people together through music is always a useful tool. But in the meantime, I'm just DJing. That's about it. Just keeping a low profile. So that keeps it alive for me. So I'm pleased with that.
So I know Annie has some questions. I just want to follow up on the music point. Just reflecting on your experience within the music industry, what do you see? How do you see it becoming more sustainable? In what ways do you think it can improve?
Well, I mean, you would like to think that as the least that big festivals and tours can do is to offset their emissions. I mean, that's the very first thing. But I would like to see, the reduction or the ban of any plastic used. I mean, the amount of plastic at festivals and concerts is just ridiculous. You've seen that in small kind of green sustainable festivals in the UK, and I'm sure worldwide. And then, what else? I mean, looking at more sustainable ways of traveling, possibly doing less huge sort of tours around the world when you can see that digital space really works. We don't all need to travel the whole time, especially on business. We can have Zoom calls, which are just as effective. I mean, you'll never be able to beat meeting someone face to face, shaking their hand, building that trust. But I mean, the corporate sphere where they go on 10 business trips, a year to go and have a piss up in another country, I think is not really a sustainable solution anymore. But in the music sphere, I think people just need to be brave. They need to come up with smart solutions like buy a ticket, plant a tree. But I mean, that's all sort of greenwashing anyway. So I don't know if that is the sustainable path. But there'll be people out there, and I know there are people out there doing cool initiatives, which is encompassing music and sustainability for sure.
Yeah, I remember seeing an article a couple of years ago from Coldplay who's saying that he wants to have zero waste kind of festival, which I thought was really interesting. Anyways, Annie, would you like to take it away from here?
Sure, thank you. Well, thank you, Ed and Hazel, for joining us today, and to our audience. And to our audience, if ever you guys have any questions, feel free to add them in the comments section. But I do have a couple questions. They're to both of you guys, and I think they work really well with the question that Kiro just asked about the music. My first question is, how did you begin your journey? So what inspired you to get involved in your focused sustainability projects? And I think you started discussing this with the music, and if you want to elaborate a bit more on that.
I think, I used to work in a corporate job until I was about 25, now 30. I kind of always had in my mind a sort of a vision to go into a passion project. So, my brother and I had long talked about creating a live music venue. So we kind of kickstarted that in a sort of cost-effective way, which was to create an events business. So we started doing like small supper clubs around London, bringing together sort of like cultural events. We do like a night in Senegal, for instance, and we bring in a Senegalese band and bring in like an artist from Senegal, and the food would all be matched and paired. So we were sort of thinking about how we could bring cool experiences to people in London. I've been to a few places around the world, been very inspired always by traveling. I think that's the main sort of inspiration for me in terms of music. It's like going to, Kenya, for instance, or going to Cuba, or even, the deep South in America. You go and see and experience these amazing, live music events, food events, whatever it is. And I think, people in the UK love that. It's a very multicultural city. The London is a multicultural city. I mean, so yeah, I think my journey was always about how we can bring back these experiences and give them to the people that we live with. And then from there, I sort of kind of got into the sustainability space because I've always had a green heart, I believe. Probably one of the reasons I didn't stay in a corporate job. I felt like I needed something which was more purpose driven. And then the sort of agricultural aspect grew out of trying to work with the Maasai. So we wanted to start off working with indigenous communities, similar to Ian Spears with his One Better World project. We understand that protecting and promoting these ancient customs and practices is so vital for our survival. Again, music is another thing that comes from these ancient communities. There's so much cool vernacular instruments and sort of ways of conducting music. So I think it all comes from wanting to preserve and promote customs and cultures really around the world. And now I'm here. It's difficult to sort of track how exactly I ended up here, but it's happened.
Very good. Well, thank you. And Hazel, I'm going to ask you the same question. How did your journey begin? What brought you to work on your focused sustainability topic, mainly focused on energy poverty?
No? Okay, I think
it was close. I thought she was about to go for it.
Okay. So, well, I guess we can wait for Hazel to come back. In the meantime, there's a question that I asked all the guests that I wanted to get to, but it was taking a bit too long. I was wondering if you can speak about what being a global citizen mean to you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, to put it in the context of food and forest, I think it's about caring for and being part of the forest, without sounding too corny. But I mean, I suppose in ancient times, we coexisted with the forest. We only consumed what was necessary, and we allowed ecosystems to be replenished. It was never this excessive consumption, greed that we're all in at the moment, which is very sad to see, and it's actually quite difficult to sometimes remove yourself from it and even realize that you're part of it. So I think what it means is probably to spend more time in a community environment, in the community space, sharing ideas, best practices. I mean, ultimately, from our point of view, we're as I said, a business, but we're very open source. We share all of our information that we've learned. We share our designs for agriculture because, we can't, there's no competition here. We have to collaborate because the task is so huge that we can't do it alone. So we're always looking to collaborate with anyone. And I think, collectively we have a chance of trying to slow down, the sort of pattern of acceleration in terms of climate change. But I think global citizen is just being open-minded, caring for one another, and trying to build something that's not for one person or one organization, but for a community or for a global community. So I think that's sort of my take on it.
Thank you. Hazel, would you like to answer Annie's question? How did your journey started? Oh my God. Okay, we're really having trouble with connections today.
It's been pretty good. She's done well. I know what it's like.
Yes.
I've been in many months, and it's a hard graft getting online.
I do have another question, if that's okay, actually. And within the meantime, I will ask you, Edward. I know you did mention that your current work kind of did take off a bit more with COVID-19, but I want to know, like, how has it affected your business development? Like, have there been challenges that you did not necessarily foresee, and how did you kind of overcome those throughout your travels and endeavors?
Yeah, so it has been pretty challenging. I mean, with the music business, we've kind of put it on ice. We did a couple of like digital experiences for brands, and we did a lot of like live streaming, DJing and stuff. But it wasn't really our bread and butter. It was all usually about these live experiences, these interactions with people, especially when it comes to music and food, because they're such like sensual experiences. But with the food and forest, it was a challenge because I was last in Kenya in January 2020, so about 2 months before UK went into lockdown, and we kind of built what we thought was the way forward for our business, and we kind of registered as a carbon program with Plan Vivo. We brought in these NGOs that we wanted to work with, and then we weren't able to go there for a year. So what we did well is we brought the NGOs and the farmers we wanted to work with online. So we had a weekly Zoom call. Like, communication was probably better than it would ever have been. So it kind of pushed us into this technological advance, which I think was quite impressive. Given, as you can see with Hazel, it's difficult to keep people online. Having said that, we then spent a year going down a path that wasn't actually sustainable. Not to go into the long story, but NGOs are sometimes difficult to implement projects with, because they have a different mentality to a business. So we're obviously trying to build capacity and all the rest, but we need to know that our counterparties have the same ethos in terms of business practice. So I think that was a shame, because we lost about a year. I wouldn't say lost, but we went down a certain avenue for a year, thinking that was a route to market. And then obviously when I went back to Kenya a few months ago, I realized that these NGOs they didn't have the capacity. So we then realized that actually we needed to build all this, the sort of skills, the training, everything needed to be done from our side. So yeah, it was useful in some respects, and then also sort of one step forward, two step back, if you see what I mean.
Well, thank you so much for all the answers and for the conversation. I do have to wrap up, just because we do need to keep our recording 50 minutes for Instagram requirements. It's a bit strange. I usually, this is my least favorite part, because I don't really want to stop talking. I would love to talk a lot more about music and about Hazel's journey and get some of those keep those conversations going. But I really enjoyed today's conversation. I think there's so many lessons that we can learn from Africa and from indigenous communities right here in Canada, and as well as across the world. They have been taking care of nature and land and water for centuries, and I think the contemporary sustainability movement really need to pay closer attention to that and learn from that a lot more. And so I hope we can keep this conversation going, and I hope that you would come back and we do repeats of these chats and continue to do that. So with that, thank you so much for participating today and for all the insights and the wisdom.
No, well, thank you guys, Caroliz and Annie, and thank you for rescheduling. I understand that I caused a bit of a conundrum there, but it was great to feature and lovely to share ideas. And of course, if anyone wants to continue the conversation with us, you can see our Grow Food and Forests across the screen, and I'm sure you'll share any other socials or website. But yeah, I mean, look, we're open to conversation, and I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. It's all about raising awareness and building this counter narrative, because there's a lot of people out there that are doing good things, and we can make a difference. But it's got to be done collectively. We've got to build this community together.
I agree. Thank you so much, Ed, and thank you, Hazel.